This is Madonna's full suspension recumbent trike build. Now stick with me, there's a lot to get through here. The customer for this build is not new to recumbents. They have had 3 recumbents I think before, but more notably they started out probably a good 10-15 years ago on a tri-sled Gizmo. Quite a sporty little trike, really suited to an urban and fast riding environment. From that they escalated to a Greenspeed Magnum, and then they escalated to putting fat tyres on the Greenspeed Magnum. Then they escalated to putting fat tyres, a motor and a battery on the Greenspeed Magnum. Then they escalated to the Greenspeed Magnum with fat tyres, a motor and 3 e-bike batteries. And this really got a little serious and it was time for something more. The next step was a move to the country for even more outback rail trails, and the need for suspension was quite obvious. Many of you might be wondering why I've never done a recumbent with suspension before. And it's really because I don't actually like doing anything by halves. And suspension is tricky. A lot of people will make it out to be a trivial little thing where you just put some springs into it. But to make good suspension on a recumbent is actually far more scientific than you might think. This request meant that it was time for me to take it seriously, to start actually looking at how to approach this. And I ended up in some really backblock places around suspension. And I saw an interview with a Formula One suspension designer who said that the Citroen 2CV had the best suspension ever designed, and I thought, what the hell is this guy on about? And then I realized the Citroen 2CV suspension idea is exactly what recumbent trikes needed. Leading arm front suspension, trailing arm rear means only one pivot per suspension element. It means low unsprung mass. It means tunable air shocks will perform well, and it means probably the best smooth riding on air suspension sensation that you could really ask for a recumbent. If I'd known it was going to be this hard, I probably wouldn't have started this project. The original designers of the Citroen 2CV were hit with an interesting challenge. The car had to be able to carry a basket of eggs across a freshly ploughed field for a farmer to use this as a market vehicle. This meant the suspension had to have very soft, smooth running, but also create a stable vehicle. The approach is legendary, and it's hard to describe how amazing this vehicle is. It's basically unrollable, yet disturbingly showing huge amounts of body roll in the process. Like it needs a sway bar, yet it doesn't have a sway bar. Now, the interesting thing about a recumbent trike is because the rider is the majority of the mass and is steadying their weight, the need for a sway bar really isn't that important. And that's when I realised that the leading arm 2CV suspension was actually the solution for the perfect recumbent trike suspension. Now, if you're still with me, you're probably actually interested in a suspension trike, and it's probably time to show you some photos of what I created. Here is a build montage of the vehicle. It's not as detailed as I would like because I was too busy trying to get this right and not spending enough time actually with the video out. But hopefully you'll get the idea of how the build process went. mentioned this customer's previous trike had 3 e-bike batteries strapped to it. Because we were custom building this, I thought it was time to actually integrate purpose-built battery mounting systems into the frame. So this frame will hold 2 25 amp hour batteries side by side, evenly matched underneath the frame, with a switch so that you can switch from one battery to the other during riding without stopping. A major feature of this build is the use of modern mountain bike air shocks. They have both preload and dampening adjustment via air adjustment. This is a bit of a game changer, and it actually means that the leading arm suspension based on the 2CV design actually gets to live out perfectly on the recumbent trike. So much so that when we work to a production version of this trike, we'll actually have recommended air pressures for rider weight, so that the machine performs the same for a smaller rider as it does for a bigger rider. And also means you can adjust it to take up the really big bumps or the really small bumps as a priority depending on your riding style. Following the completion of the trike, it was time to dial in the shocks. Here's a bunch of slow-mos of Rebecca riding the bike over a curb at 30k an hour. You'll notice in some of the earlier shots there's a little bit of rebound, which we're able to eliminate by tuning in the shock so that it properly soaked up the curb and the trike stayed with all of its wheels on the ground all at the same time. Now that's pretty cool. Real suspension on a recumbent trike is actually something that really excites me, and I'm sure it excites a lot of you. Now, I started out this build saying there's a lot to get through. I've done my best to get through it without boring you all, but this won't be the last you hear of this trike. We're actually going to name it a production model called Back of Burke, in tribute to early explorers of Australia, and working on the theory this is a bit of a go-anywhere trike. So stay tuned for developments on this trike in the future. As always, if you like this build, you should probably check out our custom blog and see some of the other custom builds we've built in the Tri-Sled website. Also, like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below, tell us what you think, and tell your friends about us. Cheers!